Qual é o estado do colégio? Sup, mais falando. Bem-vindos a mais um possivelmente que hoje questionado assistindo porcaria, mas que a gente conhece webcam parte 14, caralho, porra. Isso aí. Eu fiz uma proeza. Já tava assim faz meses. Sem a ponte. O violão. Eu perdi a porra da ponte, caralho. Vamos lá. Tá sem a ponte, porra. Ah. E isso aqui é pra cobrir um buraco que tem aqui na madeira enorme. Tipo, isso aqui é um buraco enorme aqui, ó. Tipo. E não sei se vai dar pra ver, mas. Ó, tour do violão. Adesivo aqui de banda de noisecore, Gorzão Fugido, Possessed, Boteco, Rotten Fetus, Hot, PSG, umas coisas, fita crepe. Esse aqui, dá pra ver? Dá pra ver. Dá pra ver o adesivo do Morbid, do Alter of Madness dentro do violão. É. Ideia estúpida do caralho. Yeah! Dentro do violão, porra! Isso tá indo. Não chega, o cabo não chega. Chega até o suporte de chão. Você vai com uma guitarra, nada que você já viu. Não vai cair, né? Vai, não caia. Agora vira aqui pra cima. Sai. Não tem como tirar o zoom. Certo? Vocês viram onde está o violão. Peraí. Isso mesmo, o webcam está dentro do violão, caralho. Yeah! Vou pegar a cachaça. A única coisa chata é que, fala aí, tem um negócio em colar o celular, sabe, o Windows. Sabe a parte chata? A captura lá de janela não consegue capturar o que você está vendo na tela do celular. Você tem que colocar na captura de tela cheia. O que é foda. Que uma das ideias era que eu tive no canal aqui, essa porcaria aqui, é usar duas webcam, uma delas sendo na verdade a câmera do celular aberta lá no negócio vincular a tela e sei lá, enfiar aqui, tipo, tirar esse óculos aqui, colocar aqui, ó, colocar, acho que dá pra virar assim, com a câmera virada pra cá, só que não dá certo, muito bosta isso. Acho que eu acidentalmente tirei uma foto. Tá, peraí. Tem como. É. Deixa eu ligar a luz aqui. Tá bom a posição aí? Bom pra caralho, né? Mano, sinceramente, se o cabo chegasse até o sofá ia ser muito foda. Não chega. Aí é pica, né? Aí é ruim, né? Mano, você tá com uma cara de que vai cair por qualquer bosta. E aí o vilão vai se espatifar. Você não tá com cara de que vai dar certo. Puta que pariu, seria muito da hora se negócio desse pra pegar a imagem, tipo. Eu sei que é tipo uma medida anti-pirataria que os caras fazem, mas. Pô, seria bom demais você pegar aqui e tu. Sabe? Uma captura de tela inteira. É, tela inteira. Vou pegar tudo. Queria só pegar do celular. Deve ter algum jeito. YouTube. Ah, dá pra procurar idiotice. Ótimo, já carregou, que legal. Já carregou. Não, tá certo, tá certo. Alguém lançou um vídeo novo, só que por enquanto só pra membros. Vou ter que esperar um pouco mais. No, no. Vocês vão sofrer. Não tem mais nenhum pet pra costurar. Não, pera aí, aquela bermuda é um pouco perto. Já vou. Voltei. Caralho, eu não atualizei o dia. Esqueci de atualizar o dia, pô. Animal do caralho. Falou a bermuda, não pegou a bermuda. Não vou bermuda aqui na frente, pô. Bermuda. bom? Vamos. Vamos piorar as coisas aqui. Não, pera. Tô tendo pensamentos pensantes. Deixa eu ver um negócio aqui. Não dá pra ver. Pera aí. Não, pera. Olha a cara do idiota aqui. Deixa eu... Tá aí, vai. Vai ser dentro do violão, vai ser assim então. Foi. Isso aqui é muito idiota. Ah, já vou.
Furry nightmare fuel. You know it when you see it. And if you grew up online, you've probably seen a furry Photoshop masterpiece that radicalized you. But where exactly do these images come from? Who's making them? And more importantly, who are the people into this? It turns out there's a fine line between furry art and body horror. And when you cross that line, you enter an obscure internet community where the boundaries between flesh, fursuit, and fetish don't matter. This is a deep dive into botched fursuits and body horror gone sexy. This is Bad Art History. Part 1. Furry Nightmare Fuel. The internet operates much like a freak show. We are morbidly obsessed with creating mythology around our freaks, in every sense of the word. So when a video of a furry dolphin homunculus man began circulating online in 2008 with virtually no explanation, it tapped into humanity's oldest instinct: being mean to furries on the internet. So where did this thing come from? This is where our rabbit hole begins. On March 24th, 2007, the Canadian art team North Fur, specializing in making animal-themed face prosthetics, had recently finished up their latest practice piece, a hyper-realistic dolphin muzzle. They took a few pictures, uploaded them to DeviantArt, and the whole thing flew under the radar. But a few months later, the Dolphin Man inexplicably appeared on a furry image board, and someone thought it would be funny if they reposted him to the furry porn website E621. And that was the beginning of the end. Users immediately spammed the Dolphin Man with downvotes, called him nightmare fuel, and one person even complained the image was so distressing it was making him violent. So you can imagine how people reacted when they found the dolphin video. On December 30th, 2007, the North Fur YouTube channel uploaded this alarming clip of the dolphin muzzle in a full range of motion, and Pandora's fursuit was officially unzipped. In no time at all, screenshots of the Dolphin Man began surfacing everywhere. NeoGAF, 4chan, Macrochan. And as is protocol online, if you don't know where something came from, just start making shit up. Rumors quickly spread that this was footage from some government experiment to turn people into Kyle's dad. Others claim that it was a banned Facebook video from 2004, even though it was filmed in 2006. Others still insisted that the original audio was actually lost media, uploading hoax versions of the video with their own audio and claiming that that was the original footage. And for the next 13 years, far past the point where you could simply Google this and find out where it came from, the urban legends persisted. So why did people freak out like this? I'm not gonna insult your intelligence here. There's a pretty glaring issue with this design. It's a touch too realistic for its own good, and it came along during an era of the internet where we were all briefly obsessed with Super Mario in real life.
Super Mario in real life.
For millions of people in the 2010s, Uncanny Valley images were their first contact with internet hoax imagery. And armed with this knowledge, people came away with two game theories about the dolphin guy. Either he was disturbing because furry's bad and the artists that made him sucked, and did I mention furry's bad? Or he was creepy because someone wanted him to look that way because it was a fetish thing. So to really figure out why this image exists, we gotta talk about a really freaky guy in a bathtub named Jonathan Galindo. Part 2. Goofy gooning. So in 2020, kids on the internet were legitimately living in fear of this photorealistic Goofy cosplay in piss yellow lighting with dead eyes. But one look at this image and you can tell that it's significantly older than TikTok. So where did this...
Não, pera. Pera. Ih, caralho. Não, isso não é possível. Isso aqui não é possível, velho. Não é possível, caralho. Porra, velho. Porra, isso não é possível. Isso não é possível. Não.
furry nightmare fuel par excellence come from? On January 28, 2012, a user on the furry art site Fur Affinity, going by Dusky Sam, began documenting his progress on a Goofy cosplay. Through a combination of clothes, makeup, and a dog snout prosthetic that he had purchased from North Fur FX, Dusky Sam uploaded a series of 29 photos showing off the range of his talents. He even dipped his toe into some alt history predictions. And this was all well received until it hit 4chan in 2015. Internet sleuths began digging deeper, and in no time at all, they found his Xtube account. Over the next 3 years, different Goofy photos, explicit and otherwise, began to surface on Reddit, sparking discussion about which side should have actually won World War II. But the videos have long since been taken down, the site hosting them is closed, and it seemed like Dusky Sam could finally put all of this behind him. Until 2019. That year, a new offshoot of an infamous whale-themed internet challenge had just taken off. Numerous identical accounts popped up across all social media sites claiming...
Agora eu entendi o negócio. Aí...
to be someone named Jonathan Galindo, who looked like this and threatened to dox children unless they performed some permanent act. It seems obvious now that this was not all just one guy, but TikTokers weaponized their collective 10 IQ anyway, and uncritically made the connection between Dusky Sam's cosplay and the fictional persona of Jonathan Galindo. And they came after him so hard that Samuel Canini, the actual human being behind Dusky Sam, had to issue an official statement disavowing any connection between his artwork and the challenge. And it was at this point, researching the video, that I hit a wall. I knew in my gut that this was connected to a fetish thing somehow. I wasn't convinced that this could possibly just end with the Goofy Nightmare bathtub, but I figured, okay, there's one more furry nightmare fuel classic that I haven't looked into yet. It's probably nothing, but you know, maybe it'll contain a very specific phrase that only gets used in a very obscure DeviantArt fetish community that gets so balls to the wall with it that even furries don't want to touch it. You know, hypothetically. Part 3. The Redbubble Dog Man. So it turns out I was partially right about this fetish thing because this is where it gets really weird. So a few weeks ago, Pugpoggers on Twitter asked me to find the origin of these two images. The one on the right is kind of a dead end, and it's most likely AI generated. But the one on the left is actually a Nightmare Fuel classic from 2009. Uploaded to DeviantArt that year by artist Jagdragon, it doesn't look like much. In fact, it was just this guy's Photoshop project for his CG arts class, and his intention was to morph himself with his dog. But the internet had other plans for him. And in the mid-2010s, this image made the usual rounds on Reddit and Imager, and everyone made their usual kill it with fire comments.
Tá muito bosta essa. Tá muito idiota isso aqui. Pera. Isso aqui tá muito idiota. Mas tá muito engraçado.
One Redditor found this image so frightening, he demanded to know if this actually happened to someone in real life. To this day, no one has answered him. But the Dog Man also appeared on one other website you wouldn't expect. If you reverse search this, you'll find a listing for a sticker on Redbubble. And the listing name isn't furry anything or Dog Man or anything like that. It simply reads Zoomorph sticker. So I went on deviantart.edu and typed in Zoomorph and found this, and this, and this, and all of these. Because even though the dolphin muzzle, bathtub Goofy, and the Dog Man are not exclusively fetish images as intended by the artists, in one of the worst coincidences ever, they happen to look exactly like something that is. something DeviantArt immediately recommends when you click on this image: the zoomorph humiliation fetish. But if you want to hear a sentence that's a little less upsetting, try "This video was sponsored by Meta PCs." Customizing a PC can be stressful and low-key expensive, but with Meta PCs, you don't have to break the bank. Right now, Meta PCs is offering tons of affordable ready-to-ship builds. Part 4. Boomers on DeviantArt. Now, before everyone jumps me in the comments, 3 things you ought to know. This is anthroart, as in anthropomorphic animal. This is a photomorph, a term no one really uses anymore. And this is a zoomorph. Now, on paper, these are 2 versions of the same concept: an animal with distinctly human features. But while this variety can be found basically anywhere furry art exists, this one really only lives on DeviantArt. But why? Well, there are actually a few rules when it comes to furry fetish art. Generally speaking, you don't want to lean into the human features too much, and you never, ever, ever want to cut out someone's face in Microsoft Paint and stick it on a barn animal. Unless that happens to be your fetish. So to come back to our dog man for no reason at all, right next to him is a user-generated collection called photomorphs. And already, it's not obvious that this is mainstream furry. The biggest furry porn site that hosts this kind of content only has several dozen images to offer. And one of the few artists behind most of this stuff on there nuked his entire gallery for reasons unknown. And when you look up the term zoomorph, no results on the furry porn sites. Yet, DeviantArt is crawling with these guys. This account's whole shtick is taking random selfies and photoshopping animal features onto the women's heads. And the comments are all really normal about it. This one takes a more anamorph style approach to, again, disfiguring the selfies of completely innocent women. This guy roleplays as a researcher at a medical facility that runs experiments turning beautiful young women into mammalian abominations. He goes by Theoryanthropist. Keep that name in the back of your head. And the examples are honestly too numerous to list. Every animal, every stage of transition, every conceivable category is someone's fetish on this website. And if you still don't believe me, here's a guy whose thing is specifically putting the heads of Asian women onto small animals. But hold up. You're thinking, how can you say it's a fetish just because these people are photoshopping really scary stuff using women's selfies and also writing really long stories about it? They could be doing this for any reason. There are actually some very reliable tells when it comes to DeviantArt fetish behavior. The comments, for example. On this post by the Theoryanthropist about a hot young blonde being turned into a lioness against her will, the sole comment reads, "Continue with the experiments." Or this post of a dog girl using a selfie of dubious origin, where the comments praise her remarkable beauty and one calls her good girl. You get the point. But even lacking comments, the fetish tells alone are numerous. Extreme emphasis in the photo captions on the women's humiliation and despair over their new animal body. Constant repetition when it comes to words like drooling, out of control, or the horror. And most tellingly, oh no, the big lady sat on me. If you've seen a few of these videos now, you know what that phrase means. Yeah. But if you don't, I'm basically referring to these incredibly complex origin stories that they come up with in the captions, explaining how these young, beautiful women just accidentally fell into a vat one day and became some kind of like a cat-girl science experiment. And thematically, the whole thing reads like, oh no, I can't believe this happened to me. Oh no, well, I'm not gonna do anything about it now. That kind of thing. So what to make of all this? Simply put, it's an animal transformation fetish with humiliation features. And even though the animal part plays a major role, this is really not much of a furry thing at all. They just happen to share some vocabulary. Regardless of genre, furry fetish art is primarily about animals with human features, whereas this stuff is really just human women attaining animal features, often against their will. In fact, I couldn't help but notice something incredibly boomer-coded about the entire thing, which may explain its absence on the popular websites. A lot of the women featured tend to be conventionally attractive as opposed to internet hot. You don't see a lot of e-girls, mostly stock photo models and girl next door types. The captions seemingly never refer to memes or pop culture. What film references there are feel incredibly dated. This community does little to indicate that they're aware of a world outside of DeviantArt.com. And I'd say the biggest tell is their use of this word, photo manipulation. The term is pretty dated. It was never even very popular back when photoshopping something was a novel concept. And this is obviously just my speculation, but the whole thing really does just feel like a group of older people for whom the furry thing never clicked in their heads. So if they're not furries, then how did they figure out they were into this? Part 5. Boomer body horror. Transformation fetishes are everywhere online. Often abbreviated TF, they're one of the most popular categories among furry websites and really anywhere you find fetish art, period. And the simplest explanation is, many people are drawn to imaginary scenarios where they can surrender power of their body in a controlled environment. Kinda like a masochism thing. Others prefer the opposite, where they can transform into something big and powerful. As with a lot of fetishes with big internet communities, it's often a case of early childhood exposure to transformation sequences in books and movies and cartoons, things that take on a morbidly fascinating quality by the time puberty rolls around. According to psychologist and professional gamer PhD Dr. Mark Griffiths, the most common type of transformation material online, by far, is humans turning into animals. And this is not shocking. Transformation has a massive overlap with basically every subculture that has even a single gooner among its ranks. As one transformation fetishist explains, I don't identify at all with the furry thing. I mean, no offense to those of you who do. For me, it's merely a curiosity about what a particular form would physically feel like. And in some cases, there's even a slight element of humiliation at no longer being entirely human. It's when some element of control and/or slight humiliation appears that it becomes erotic. In fact, I've noticed one common theme in all the transformation scenes that caught my attention growing up. The scene typically focuses on the character's reaction, which is often a sense of, my own body is betraying me. In the imagination, transforming can be liberating and escapism and empowering and all that good stuff. But in reality, it would be pretty painful and horrifying to behold. Now, quick tangent here. For what it's worth, the dolphin muzzle was not a fetish piece. We know this because in virtually all of the posts on the usual sites tagged NorthFurFX, it's just run-of-the-mill photography showing off their makeup skills. No holes, barely any flesh. But he breaks the illusion, because in real life, transformation would probably look a lot like this. In other words, disfiguring. And for people who get off to humiliating transformations, that's the whole point. It's only a few clicks away from zoomorphism before you get into the darker stuff. Girls stranded in the humiliating midpoint between woman and reptile, women who barely resemble humans at all. Many of these I can't even show you because they're legitimately just screenshots from the hub, with the women's faces made to look as animalistic and disfigured as possible. And if you dig deeper still, you find the dog woman head swap community, which is exactly what it sounds like. And when I call this stuff body horror, that's not me clutching my pearls. Think of it this way. Terror and exhilaration are very similar feelings. Transformation and body horror are both visually effective through the intimate manipulation of the body. They both change you, they both strip you of your control, and they both can get pretty dehumanizing in the most practical sense. And honestly, I think that's where a lot of the morbid fascination comes from. It's not a coincidence that horror and sci-fi often evoke body horror and sexuality in the same breath. People like being stimulated, they like being manhandled, and you only need to get your wires crossed one time to decide that this is as sexy as this. But what about the real thing? Virtually all this stuff is confined to art and fetish fiction, but there are people who take this stuff to its logical extreme. Because when Photoshop isn't enough, you can always just carve up your actual body. Super Mario in real life. Biofur as a term is very controversial. You can't look it up on DeviantArt, and its discussion page on Wikifur cites its unpopularity as a naming convention because so few people seem to identify that way at all. But every group is entitled to its outliers, and there is a vanishing minority of furries for whom transformation art alone simply doesn't cut it. Back in 1998, a furry troll going by Blue Otter launched Furnetics.com, the website of an alleged gene therapy clinic running out of Mongolia that was developing human-to-furry technology. You can even click this link that goes nowhere to learn about their upcoming 2015 partnership with the nation of Iran. But some people were more sincere about this. In the 2000s, there was this very obscure website called the Equine Dream Foundation. Its mission statement? Promote transhumanism through body mods, surgery, medicine, any means necessary. The site itself contains a few pieces of transformation fiction and poetry. On their Hall of Fame page, they cite Michael Jackson, the Lizard Man, and this man covered in leopard print tattoos as living examples of extensive body modification. Now, the implication that Michael Jackson literally became a white guy because he had vitiligo is very funny and incorrect, and I'm not really sure what he's doing on this website, but it did make me laugh. I wasn't expecting to see that. And while someone like the Lizard Man is undeniably super modded in service of looking like a specific animal, the consensus is not that he's literally turning into one. Evidently, this subculture got laughed out of the room by other furries, and this is probably why biofur never really became a thing. There's even a 2008 DeviantArt thread making fun of this specific website. But surely, one person out there must have attempted to remove body parts to actually become an animal, right? In the most extreme example that I could find, some of you may remember this 2019 incident where a furry, alleged, had some kind of a DIY dry ice treatment that he was using for his arthritis, which accidentally froze his hands and forced him to amputate. Allegedly, so that he would have no choice but to wear prosthetic paws for the rest of his life. Now, I have looked high and low for evidence that this is something this person did on purpose, and every single time I found the same 4chan screenshot that people were reposting and treating as gospel. I really don't know what to think. I'm not sure this is true. So, are people doing this to themselves in real life? You know, like that one Redditor wanted to know about the dog man? No. But there is a small online community of people that believe in this on a spiritual level, and they call themselves Therians. And there's that word again, Therian. You may remember that the DeviantArt Medical Experiments roleplay guy, his username contained this word, Therianthropist. But Therians online are a different thing, and they're not a fetish. They know that they're human beings, but it's their belief that their human form does not reflect the innate spiritual animal identity that they experience. They don't actually think they're turning into animals, and they really only pertain to our discussion because they use similar vocabulary to the zoomorph fetish guys, but I have a feeling that's only the case because the genre of guy turning into animal provides us very little vocabulary to choose from. So we've covered the nightmare fuel, we covered the fetish, we covered the body horror thing, but we haven't covered you. Because you have definitely indulged in this kind of thing, not necessarily in a fetish way, and you probably didn't think twice. The true part 5, John Pork. It turns out the anthropomorphic animal thing has been a fixture of every society since the beginning of forever, and ours is no exception. Some of you grew up reading Animorphs, some of you watched Disney's Robin Hood as a kid, some of you heard the animal sounds Jonathan Davis was making and decided to take it literally, and some of you are just really big fans of John Pork. Horse girl, cosplay, Snapchat animal filters, drag makeup, the cat girl phenomenon, this stuff is ubiquitous. I think it's an inherent part of human nature to try and identify with our animal companions, and most of the time, it's completely fun and innocent. There just happens to be a minority of people for whom the experience is a little more intense. But to finish our journey all the way back out of the rabbit hole, let's return to our nightmare fuel and specifically to the artists that made it possible. There's one question about the Dolphin Man that we still haven't answered. Why did he look like that? Well, I hit up North4FX on Twitter, and this is what they had to say. In 2005, I met my partner, and he wanted to be more involved in my business. He'd never tried sculpting before. In 2006, we discussed what he could sculpt, and we decided to go for a dolphin because he was a fan of the Sega Echo games, and I thought it would be a simple shape to train on. So we both worked on the dolphin, passing it back and forth, taking turns working on it, for him to get a feel for the process. Unfortunately, he couldn't quite get a grasp for morphing an animal shape to fit over a human head, and he hasn't sculpted since. The makeup was done on August 30th, 2006, where I modeled it. I saw the "this is not a drill" video when I saw a notification on my YouTube copyright tab. I thought it was funny. I'm very aware of how creepy what I make is. The uncanny valley is my playground, and I enjoy making art that leans over that cliff. I've mostly just been sitting back and chuckling and just letting people have their fun with it. It's an extension of their creativity to create stories and videos and edits with it. I've seen the origin stories people whip up, or the people treating it as some sort of lost media to go find the original audio. I never included the audio because my old digital camera had terrible onboard audio. Old early-gen digital cameras sucked. So basically, they never set out to terrify the public, and neither did Dusky Sam, or the Dog Man, or ostensibly the dog woman head swap fetish guys on DeviantArt. It was just an unintended consequence that made for good internet storytelling. So if you're gonna get into this kind of thing and share it online, just be warned. It could get a little hairy. This has been Bad Art History. Thank you again.
Já volto. Já volto. Retornei.
And to the GOAT, Meta PCs, for sponsoring today's video. Please make sure to use my link below or use code Frankie at metapcs.com right now to get your sweet discount. And thank you, as always, to the patron cells for keeping the dream alive.
Ai, nossa. Op.
My work is easy because I use ClickUp. Here's how I keep track of all my tasks. I start by brain dumping everything I need to get done in a list view. Next,
Neodymium magnets are extremely powerful rare earth magnets that became a bit of a cultural sensation in the early 2010s when a number of toy manufacturers, in particular a company named Buckyballs, began to sell sets of neodymium balls. The powerful attraction between the balls lent itself to building all kinds of interesting shapes and structures and was often marketed as a stress reliever for adults. The magnet toys were a huge success and became a staple of office culture around the country. However, it was also often the subject of controversy due to safety issues. By 2012, nearly 3,000 people found themselves in the emergency room due to the accidental ingestion of these toys. Well, what if, instead of putting them in your mouth, you put them in your dick? Well, that's exactly what this Redditor did in what was named r/Today I Fucked Up's biggest fuck up of 2012.
I've been dying to tell you about this for months, and now I finally can. What I got right here in my hands, the official Justin Wang U2's figurine. It's available August 9th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I know what you're thinking. I specifically told their designers to make this figurine as difficult to fit in jars as they possibly could, so try your best. I was also really particular about the detail.
Meu Deus do céu. Acho que tá escrito certo essa porra, velho. Eu acho. Tipo. Pô, tem uns anos que eu fiz essa coisa aí. Tá certo sim. Eu tava pensando em fazer nessa época. Vou mostrar o que é exatamente que eu pesquisei. Isso. Meu, acho que eu tava pensando em fazer, tipo, sei lá, um álbum de trash de Cavaleiros do Zodíaco na época, tem 5 anos já.
Details of my fitness figure, if you know, you know, and the packaging has some little Easter eggs that will make longtime viewers of the channel happy. And buying the figure directly supports the channel. And it's limited edition, so once it's sold out, it's gone forever. If you want a chance to get a free one though, we are doing a giveaway. Just go to justinwang.youtooz.com. And once again, that's August 9th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Today I fucked up by combining magnets with my urethra. NSFW. I am the luckiest dumbass ever to live. So, I had the weekend at home to myself. My flatmate had gone away, a little me time was scheduled. Now, I like to experiment. I'd heard about sounding, sticking things into the urethra, and thought I'd give it a go. Sounding, I recall, being something that I learned about when I came across the website Kids in the Sandbox, and if you know what that site is, now you too know what is meant by sounding. And if you don't know what it is, Google it at your own risk. Initial experiments were unsuccessful. Chopsticks were a little large for my virgin pee hole. No big deal. I'm sure I could find something else. Now, a little history. Do you know what Buckyballs are? They are a type of office toy, really popular a couple years back. They are small, spherical, strong magnets. Pretty neat. They can be combined into all sorts of cool shapes. Also, they form into a lovely string. Can you see where this is going? Well, wouldn't you know it, a string of Buckyballs slides up the urethra just perfectly, like it was made for it. It's a beautiful thing. I can pass away a happy afternoon plumbing the depths. These things can go a long way, and the further they go, believe me, the better it feels. Readers who have owned Buckyballs, do you see my error? Do you see how this delicate chain of balls, so exquisitely suited to its purpose, holds my doom? So, evening rolls around, I decide on one last plunge. This cop is a day from retirement. This space miner has discovered a nest of funny looking eggs. This hitchhiker is rolling up to the Bates Motel, and this is one last plunge. In they go. 10, 20, 30 beads. More. 40, 50, I don't count. I don't care. Feels good. I feel at this point I must explain a little bit more about buckyballs. I've described them as a chain. This is not so. Each ball is separate, only held to the next by its magnetism. And what do magnets love to do? They love to stick together. Remember this. I did not. My last plunge, my final dive continues. Soon, better than half a meter of magnets is inside me. I am, through the prostate, through the sphincter, in the bladder. I push on. I hit the top of the bladder. I am possessed. I push on. The buckyballs, the magnets, start to bend and curve back towards themselves. Still, I push on. Click. I hear a sound from deep within me. The sound of two magnets meeting and mating. Suddenly, my beautiful chain of balls is a tangled, magnetized lump in my bladder. This is the worst possible thing. But now I have lengthened my tail over long. Panic stations were activated, rationality and sobriety returned, and I started to pull. Gently, oh so gently I pulled. This chain, this thin chain of balls was still held together only by magnetism and hope, and now there was resistance. At any moment the chain could break, would break, was certain to break, and if it did, there would be no hope. Nothing short of surgery would remove them. Still, the chain held all the way down, right down to the penis. Did you know the smallest diameter part of the whole system is the end of the penis? I do. Oh, I do. It's stuck. A magnetic lump of steel, a centimeter wide, stuck an inch from freedom, locked behind my penile gates. The chain broke. Many times the chain broke, but the blockage was so close to the end that, with care, it could be reattached, only to break again. Of note here is the pinching. I hope you do not know the pain of a thin layer of penile skin being pinched repeatedly between two powerful magnets. And to demonstrate what he's talking about, allow me to explain that it's possible for neodymium magnets to break bones. There was blood. Even now it throbs. The end, however, was in sight. The magnet clump was out of the danger zone, the operation zone. It was in my penis. I could control it. I could win. And with the help of a knife and a ballpoint pen lid, I did. TLDR, I'm not sure I'd advise sticking 74 magnets up your dick. And here's the thing. Just because he managed to get the main chain out doesn't necessarily mean that, he didn't lose one of these balls up in his bladder or somewhere along the way. So, he wasn't gonna do it, but Reddit urged him, please, sir, go to the fucking doctor.
Corona. Há 100 anos fazendo da praia palco.
And he eventually did. Greetings once again, all ye dwellers of Today I Fucked Up. My last thread caused some considerable comment. Many of the comments were along the lines of, old man, you really ought to get to a doctor to look at your area. This, combined with a certain odd sensation in my bladder, made me concerned enough to consider it. My main worry was that there were balls left inside me, and without an x-ray I would never truly know. So last Friday I went. I made an appointment at the GUM clinic. GUM, genitourinary medicine clinics, are excellent for those, like me, who, perhaps, do not want too much documented in their permanent medical notes. They are, much like here, anonymous-ish. I arrive, I fill in a form. Surprisingly enough, none of the questions were enormously relevant to my case, and in I go to speak to the nurse. At this point, I was concerned that I would just freeze up and not be able to string together anything remotely coherent. Oddly enough, though, it turns out that, again, much like here, semi-anonymity removed all barriers of shame. I was eloquent. I was articulate. She was confused. She went and got the doctor. She was confused. This was new to her, but she was as old as God and pretty hard-ass, so she also mocked me appropriately. Evidently something above the pay grade of the nurse. I had it coming. I didn't mind. She examined me. It was extraordinarily non-sexual, and Slightly fumbling for ideas, tried using the demonstration buckyballs I had brought along to detect any magnetism from the outside. This worked exactly as well as you might expect. The next step was an x-ray of my gonads. Poor little fellows hadn't yet been through enough abuse, it seems, and a dose of gamma rays was their next challenge. Thing with x-rays is, they don't normally do them for STDs. So I was sent up to x-ray with a brown paper envelope with a letter inside, which I did not look at, but which presumably read, "This guy." I was taken aside, ushered past the queue of old creaky people, and set up. The poor lady couldn't say penis, which caused some troubles when I had to arrange myself for the scan. We finally got some things sorted. It's important not to have overlapping layers, you know? Anyway, the part y'all came here for. The x-ray was negative. I have no buckyballs inside me. Thank all the deities, an operation would have been the only way to remove them if there had been any stragglers. I hadn't realized how nervous I was until the good news was relayed to me by old frowny piss-takey doctor lady. I punched the air. I may have even vocalized some sort of "aw yeah." She was unmoved. She told me not to do it again. Listen to frowny old doctor ladies. TLDR, surprised old lady, got lucky. P.S. Apologies, this update doesn't really have the pop of the previous entry, does it? Alas, with updates, it is ever thus. Dipping greedily back into the depravity trough and coming up dry. And if you look at some of the x-rays that are floating around on the internet, you'll see that this particular buckyball excursion was not a rare case. And because of issues like this, in 2012, the sale of spherical magnet toys was banned by the US government. However, this ban was overturned in 2016, so if you'd like to find yourself some buckyballs to enjoy, be my guest. Just, I wouldn't recommend sticking them up your pee hole. Actually, maybe I'll put them in my Amazon store, but I guess that means doubly, don't put them up your fucking pee hole and blame me on it. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.
When someone in real life asks me what my YouTube channel is about, I usually just say it's weird internet stories. But that can mean a lot of different things, only connected by a very loose thread. Like, what does a guy getting candle wax stuck in his urethra have to do with a white lady waking up Chinese? Or a beloved fitness guru being doxxed and outed as gay? Weird internet story can encompass a lot of different things, so for today's video, let's take a look at some of my favorite stories that haven't found their way into a compilation yet. This video is sponsored by Lilo. I know a lot of you guys watching are jacked, muscle-bound, genetic freaks. But no matter how hard you go at the gym, I'm sure there's something that you might be ignoring. Something that will help your performance not just in the gym, but in the bedroom. I'm talking about the pelvic floor. The pelvic floor muscles are key to core strength, bladder control, and endurance. And if yours are weak, you can have issues like premature ejaculation, incontinence, and reduced performance. On the flip side, strengthening these muscles not only improve your performance, but also improve prostate health by promoting better circulation and reducing the risk of complications. This isn't just some fringe thing for message board weirdos either. Top athletes and wellness experts incorporate pelvic floor training into their routines. And to help you with that, we got the Lilo F2S Stamina Trainer. The Lilo F2S Stamina Trainer is a high-tech male stamina training device that strengthens the pelvic floor with guided exercises through the Lilo app. Train your stamina with 9 different intensity settings. The Lilo app will keep track of your progress and give you achievements to help you keep on track. The app also has Kegel workouts to further contribute to the strengthening of your pelvic floor. If you're ready to start your pelvic fitness journey today, just click the link in the description right now. You ever look at an ostrich? Like, really look at an ostrich? It's just one of the weirdest looking animals ever. They're all grown with a baby bird looking fuzzy head. Stay like that their whole lives. all giving you that deep inquisitive stare like they're deeply analyzing you. But you can still tell there's just not much going on. A literal bird brain, with those weirdly muscular legs like when people like to draw Kirby buff. Well, just imagine what it would be for that freakish creature to just diddle you at in public in front of a laughing crowd. That's exactly what happened to one Something Awful user, in a story that's just been burned into my mind for decades. But don't you worry, he gets his comeuppance. For today's video, let's take a look at Something Awful's Tales from the Zoo. Something Awful's been around for a long time. One of the first really popular comedy sites online. I spent so much time in my life back in the day looking at their articles, stuff like Cliff Yablonsky Hates You, where, he makes fun of people's physical appearances, which is what the internet's all about. Just so much content that you'd have to, at this point, to get through all of it, you had to be like one of those ancient monks. But of everything I've ever read on that website, there's one thing that sticks out in my brain so solidly, and I've heard this sentiment echoed by a lot of people. That being the Tales from the Zoo series. That being said though, I don't recall this being a thing that went terribly viral outside of Something Awful, like Super Hornio Brothers or anything like that. So if you weren't actively reading the site at the time, you probably missed it. The first installment of Tales from the Zoo was published on April of 2003, and it's a collection of stories from one forum user, Big Peeler. Ryan Adams, who collected these stories for the Comedy Goldmine section, noted that Something Awful forum users come from a wide variety of backgrounds. And of all of them, Big Peeler's experiences as a zookeeper really stuck out. The first story he tells, Big Peeler gets it in the ass from an ostrich. He begins by talking about the process of picking the yard, which means cleaning up the animal turds. This was one of the main tasks of the zookeepers, and they had to get it done as early as possible. Otherwise, people are going to be coming into the zoo and just staring at a bunch of turds all over the place. For some animals, the zookeepers had to do this while they were separated from the animals, preferably while they were asleep. Because, I'm sure you've seen some pretty graphic videos of tigers at the zoo. But remember, this video is sponsored by Something Awful, not LiveLeak. The ostriches, though, they were generally safe to be around. Generally. He goes on to describe how dumb the ostriches are. As he puts it, look at the size of their heads. It's as big as your fist, and their brains are as big as your left nut. In fact, these animals are so dumb that sometimes they just do Big Peeler's job for him. They are so fucking stupid that they would take a shit and turn around and eat it. We would laugh our asses off watching them do this. Their tail would go up in the air and this huge greenish brown plop would come out, then they'd turn around and look at it, then gobble it down. You would see this softball-sized lump go down their necks and they just walk off. Morons. This guy really hates the ostriches, but I'm sure you'll understand why. Now, the ostriches are a popular attraction at the zoo, not just because they're so weird looking, but also they do this thing. Every 2 minutes or so, they'll bend their neck into like an S shape. They stretch their wings out and just run around in circles. One gets started and they all start going. It's contagious like a classroom of remedial children. In case you're having a hard time picturing what I'm describing here, the San Diego Zoo actually has a video of it. It's entitled Ostriches Stuck on Spin Cycle, and honestly, it's a bit more graceful than I expected, especially considering how weird the ostriches look. But once again, I can see why Big Peeler doesn't see the beauty in the ostrich dance. So when they'd go to pick the ostrich yard, it was a two-man team. On this fateful day, the team was him and his friend Gary. One man would have a shovel and a rake to collect the ostrich leavings, while the other one would man the big plastic garbage can and stand guard, in case the ostriches got a little suspicious. Because if you recall, they do enjoy to partake in their own feces. So that garbage can was for them a smorgasbord on wheels. And if they got close enough to partake, it'd be a huge mess. He also noted the risks of an ostrich attack. The only harm an ostrich can really do to you is attack you with their middle toe. They kick forward and can open a person's belly up with one swipe. Hey, it's what they do. But attacks like that are very rare with females, and that's all we had in this yard. So they're out here picking the yard, and they're not particularly concerned with the danger of the ostriches, or for that matter, the grossness of the poop. They're just completely desensitized to it at this point. He even described how sometimes they just grab a turd with their hands and kind of shoot it at the garbage can, just Kobe, with the turd. What they're mostly concerned about is the public. They're always trying to hop over the ropes into the yards, or trying to pet the animals or feed them their soda cups or some stupid shit like that. Zookeepers hate the public. Anyhow, at this point, they've gone through the yard and the garbage can's filled up completely. So Gary has to get a new garbage can, leaving Big Peeler alone with the birds and the public. While he's by himself, he notices a few eggs. Remember that this yard is all female, so they're definitely not fertilized. So what they would do is they would just grab the eggs and bring them to the commissary and have themselves a big-ass ostrich omelet. That might sound gross to you, but honestly, I'd try it. Ostrich meat ain't that bad, so why would the eggs be? So he goes to pick up these eggs, and as soon as he does, he senses a presence behind him. And he drew an MS Paint masterpiece depicting this scene. In a second, I see this ostrich out of the corner of my eye. Before I could turn around, she sort of knocked me down on one knee. Why, you motherfucker? And I tried to stand up. Bam! She bumps me again from behind, and this time she knocks me flat on my stomach. I can hear the people standing on the edge of the ostrich yard laughing. Here, I'm getting attacked by this pea-brained bird, and they're laughing their asses off. And then, 400 pounds or so of ostrich climbs on top of him, starts to hump him, thrusting right at his ass. At this point, the crowd are completely losing their minds and cheering on the ostrich to have its way with him. Gary sees what's going on and runs back, yelling and waving his arms in the air. This was not a good idea, as the act of going like this made him look like a bigger threat to the ostrich. So now it's even more aggressively trying to protect her nest. She leaves Big Peeler alone and starts to chase Gary. And as he said before, one of them gets started and they all start going, so now there's 10 ostriches chasing them. In an attempt to confuse the birds, they try to run in an S pattern. The audience is now howling with laughter, and hell, I couldn't blame them. Here we are, running around like Stevie Wonder at a track meet. I've got 5 birds after me, and Gary's got 5 after him. In any case, it kinda is working, and they manage to get halfway across the yard. But then, one of the birds manages to trap Gary against the wall. She's pecking at his head and kicking him, and he's screaming for help. And as he said before, it's rare, but these animals can do damage if they want. So Big Peeler, to save his friend, picks up a rake and starts swinging. He hits the bird in its ass, getting its attention. Then he swings it right at her neck. What comes next, you know how I said this story is just completely burned into my memory? It's really what happens next that's just it's such a clear visual that never leaves me. Accompanied, of course, by another MS Paint masterpiece. The blow had broken the ostrich's neck. Not just like, my neck's broken, like it snapped it like a twig. Just 18 inches of neck dangling with the head still attached. And even in this state, the bird continues to chase Big Peeler. Eventually, though, she starts to lose her senses, starts running in all kinds of crazy directions, starts jumping, and then it falls over dead in front of a crowd of screaming adults and crying children. Everyone's screaming and covering their eyes and calling us names. I'm like, hey, we almost got killed here, folks. Fuck those ostriches. They get back to the barn and debrief their boss on what just happened. And at this point, they're sure they're going to lose their jobs. Especially since now they've got a big crowd of people who are angry that they just watched zookeepers kill an ostrich. Luckily for them, there was a guy who saw the whole thing and told the head curator what really happened. That basically they had to defend themselves in a life or death situation, and thus they were able to keep their jobs. Then this happens. We went back out with a wheelbarrow and took the corpse up to the hospital. They did a thorough examination and deemed it disease-free. The following statement is totally true, I swear on my dead mother's eyes. The next week, we ate it. We cooked it like a turkey and ate it. Since it died of natural causes, it was totally safe. We had huge ovens in the commissary since we prepared food for the whole zoo there. We had a huge zoo BQ featuring the ostrich. Drumsticks as big as a watermelon. Totally fucking surreal. Oh, it tastes just like beef. Honestly, very gamey. Now, I know even though he says it's totally true, some people are going to see that and be like, oh yeah, it's probably made up. But honestly, one thing that really sells this story to me is that he very accurately described the taste of ostrich in 2003. Because at the time, I mean, now you can kind of get ostrich all over the place. Well, you can literally just go on Wild Fork and order yourself a couple ostrich steaks. But at the time, people weren't really eating ostrich like that. Poor Kurt Angle got so much grief for advertising ostrich jerky. But it actually does kind of taste like beef, while having more protein and less fat than chicken. At this point, it probably sounds like I'm being paid off by Big Ostrich, but I'm just stating facts here. You know, I enjoy a nice scented candle sometimes. I got all different kinds. I got chocolatey ones, peppermint. I got this one that kind of smells like a Christmas tree. There's been a few times when I put out the candle, I'm done with it for the night, I go to move it, and I get a little bit of a candle wax on my finger. And you quickly notice the unusual properties of the melted wax. How quickly it dries and hardens as it cools down, and how it just readily takes on the shape of whatever it's dried on. And it's pretty simple to make your own candles. A lot of people do it for fun or for profit. You can get all kinds of fun molds to make different shaped candles. But of course, anything that could be filled with wax could be a mold. I mean, it's basically how a kidney stone works, right? Yeah, you might say that you're basically walking around with a bunch of free candle molds at any given time. This is the story of the guy who put candle wax in his pee hole. On Friday, January 6th of 2017, a now deleted post was made to r/TIFU. TIFU by getting way too curious as a teenager and putting something somewhere I shouldn't have, which honestly describes a good chunk of posts that are ever made to that subreddit. This is actually why the post was eventually deleted, as they now have a rule against the common types of oopsie daisies. In my opinion though, this one's a little special, and thankfully it was archived on r/undelete. The poster, 30 years old at the time of posting, tells a story from spring break 15 years prior when he was 15 years old. He couldn't go outside anywhere for undisclosed reasons, but I'm just picturing when Bart Simpson broke his leg and suddenly he becomes an Alfred Hitchcock character. Although I guess this poster is not so much Alfred Hitchcock as he is Alfred plays with his cock. And that's exactly what he did all summer. It's just him and his 56K modem on a never-ending goon sesh. He also mentions that he was a bit of a pyromaniac, but he quickly notes that it's not what you might be thinking. We're not getting any kind of reenactment of the end scene of Salo here. He blows out one of his candles, and as I spoke about in the intro, he gets some wax on his hands. And in his bored, cabin fever-addled state, he starts playing with it like Play-Doh. It gets to that point everyone gets to with Play-Doh where you just start rolling it up into a tube. He makes a 2-inch long pencil shape, and then he gets an idea. I wonder what this would feel like in my dick. I don't know what it is that so many dudes just, for some reason, instinctually come to the conclusion that this might feel good. Because to me, that's something you naturally want to avoid, because you just assume it's gonna hurt. But I guess him and all the sounding enjoyers out there are just built different. Without hesitation, I dropped my shorts and proceeded with my endeavor to explore the unexplored. About halfway, I was thinking this felt strange, but after the better part of a week of choking the chicken, anything different felt good. So I pushed it in until I could barely see it. I sat there touching myself thinking it wasn't half bad, but then I noticed my little wax probe was slowly disappearing deeper. He tried to squeeze it back out, but it wouldn't come back out. It disappears inside of him completely, and now he begins to panic. I think back to the Buckyball incident I once spoke about on the channel, how the guy eventually reaches for the X-Acto knife. But this guy hadn't gotten that desperate yet. His first idea, he's gonna pee it out. OP runs to the bathroom and pisses with all his might, but nothing. He then does perhaps the most mind-boggling thing in this entire story. He goes to the shower to look for it in his butt. How do you even conceive of that? Like, does he think the human body is hollow like a piggy bank and everything's just kind of rolling around in there? I mean, he was a young guy, but 15's not that young. This is like baby brain stuff. Surely you gotta have more sense than that. Although thinking about it, I did have a friend when I was about that age who thought you can get a girl pregnant from a BJ. So I guess, you know, some people are like that. In any case, you will be shocked to hear that he did in fact not find it in his butt. Then he comes up with one third and final plan. He's gonna jerk it out. He engages in an intense session that he refers to as the Fap and the Furious. He was imagining that there might be a massive explosion of jizz and candle wax that frees him of this prison. Instead, he just got a little trickle. A pathetic tiddlywink, as I once heard this referred to. So he's just sitting and crying in the shower now. He knows he should go to the doctor, but he has to tell his parents why he needs to go to the doctor, which in so many of these stories is the reason that they get way worse than they had to be. So instead, he just goes about his life with a pregnant wiener. Every step felt like he was being stabbed in the crotch, and he constantly felt like he had to pee even if he didn't. But when he went, only a little bit of pink-tinged urine came out. But despite his agony, he couldn't bear to tell his parents to go to the doctor. So I just lived with it every day. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The pain never got better. I just resigned myself to the fact that this was my life now. He claims to have lived like this for 2 years after the incident, until the summer after graduation. He's at a party drunk off his ass. Then he hits the strip club with his friends, which seems a bit odd as he'd be 17 years old here, maybe 18 if his birthday was in a span of a couple months. Perhaps he's in Canada or the UK where this is allowed, or maybe he had a fake ID. In any case, he says he's having a great time and then he goes to the bathroom. He's pissing, but then suddenly the stream comes to a halt and he gets this weird feeling. And then I see it. Amidst the trickle of pink urine, I see this thing peek out the tip. It's the piece of wax I had lost 2 years earlier. I'm so drunk and excited I don't know what to do. I grab the end of it very carefully and slowly pull it out. I stop for a couple seconds to look at it and ponder my life up to this point. Then I throw it in the toilet finish my business, and go on my way. He describes the relief he felt, that this constant white noise of pain he'd been experiencing for the past 2 years just vanished in an instant. He felt light, like Goku taking off his weighted clothes. The experience changed his entire personality. For 2 years, this thing had caused me depression, anxiety, and embarrassment. With that thing finally out of me, I became less introverted. I was more open to going out socially. 2 months later, I went off to college and met the woman I would eventually marry. It was a strange and uncomfortable period in my life, but a valuable lesson was learned. Don't put shit where it doesn't belong. If you do, make sure you have some method of retrieval. Now, while TIFU will often give the benefit of the doubt to even the most ridiculous stories, people are not having this one. This one almost unanimously gets called out as bullshit for a wide variety of reasons. For starters, the 2 years thing. You really dealt with constant agonizing pain for 2 years straight. That's one of those things that, no matter how deep your sense of embarrassment, you'll eventually crack. Hardened war criminals will give up their life's work over less torture. And you're some sheltered 15-year-old who's afraid of his mommy? Like, I don't think so. As one commenter, SinkingFun33, pointed out, the intellectual skill in writing this story and the act described in the story do not correspond at all. Why not see a doctor if you are peeing blood for years? You didn't have to tell your parents what you did. And even if you really are that tough of a 15-year-old to survive 2 years of agony, this would eventually lead to some kind of health problem that wouldn't be possible to cover up. Perhaps an infection of some sort, or renal failure. There is some debate over whether hydronephrosis, the swelling of the kidneys, was possible from a partial obstruction like this. You'll also remember that the matter of him going to a strip club at 17 years old made me raise my eyebrow a bit. A Redditor named Green6 pointed out a detail that I hadn't even considered. Story doesn't add up. Talks like an American. Don't know where in America you can go and get pissed drunk at 17 at a strip club. I hadn't even considered looking at how he talks. And sure enough, you can see that he's spelled endeavor as an American would, with no letter U. It was also argued that even considering the possible health complications, it's unlikely that the wax would stay there in that state for 2 years. Urine is warm and acidic. Within 2 years, it would have slowly came out way before 2 years. I call bullshit. Although another user argued against this point. Body temperature is usually too low to melt wax, and not even concentrated sulfuric acid would do anything to paraffin wax. Alternatively though, it's possible that the thing would actually get bigger, because the wax could gradually accumulate minerals from urine streams. Another user, When the Light Goes, consulted the experts at r/sounding. I find it hard to believe that a piece of candle wax would actually be sucked down into the bladder by some unknown force. As corroborated by the experienced folks at r/sounding, a solid rod would be prevented from going too far down the urethra by the greater than 90-degree bend in the ladder. If a sound does get lost, it can simply be retrieved when the penis becomes flaccid again. In the unlikely event that the candle wax broke up inside the penis, one really could simply push on their perineum, the skin between your willy/vag and your bumhole, on their prostate to remove the object. He also claimed, as many others did, that the story was essentially a rip-off of a story by Chuck Palahniuk, the short story Guts, which appeared in his book Haunted. In Guts, the narrator details a bunch of different ways that people he knew injured themselves trying to get off, not unlike some of the videos I've made.